In this video, I'm going to be recapping the two trades I took this week. One was a loss, one was a win. I trade supply and demand using order flow as my confirmation, and I want to go over why I took these trades, what I did well, and what I could have done better. So going into a bit of context for this first trade I took, this was the losing trade. I had a 4-hour supply zone at 69.67, and this supply zone wasn't the best because the drop from it didn't have the best breaker structure, which I'd want to see when drawing my supply and demand zone. Looking at the 1 minute chart now, we can see that the day so far had been very rangy, and in these conditions, I don't like to trade apart from failed breaks of the range back into the range. And the only plan I saw here that would align with that was a failed break of the intraday highs into my supply zone for buyers to get trapped to then trade a short down into VWAP, which was the nearest point I could see that price could bounce at. The price does eventually break above the intraday highs into my supply zone, and if I pull up a footprint chart, what I saw was all this aggressive buying on that intraday high break, but the price started stalling out and not moving higher despite all this buying pressure. And by the way, if you're confused as to what you're looking at, this is a delta footprint chart. Delta just means ask minus bid price. For example, we have a positive delta of 208 here, meaning there were 208 more contracts aggressively traded on the ask, so aggressive buyers, than there were sellers on the bid. And I also have the big trades indicator added over top, which is just another way of looking at aggressive buyers or sellers hitting the market. Seeing all that buying not lift the price higher, the price isn't accepting these higher prices, it starts stalling out and aggressive sellers start stepping in. Once I see that, I enter short at 69.63, speculating that this high of day break will fail at my supply zone to trade it back down to VWAP. Pulling up my NinjaTrader chart, this is where I do all my executions on. I entered at the 69.63s over here, placing my stop loss at this blue line, which was about 3.5 points, targeting this blue line down here, which indicates where VWAP was, which in total was about a 2.6 to 1 risk reward, I believe. Overall, this trade was great. I had the supply zone breaking above the intraday highs, and I had all that buying failing to push it higher. The only things I would change about this trade is I do think I ended a little bit late. I could have entered like a point sooner or so. I hesitated for that like 1 second. And another thing I would definitely change is I moved my stop loss down like 0.5 point. I had it above this high and I moved it down to here after I'd seen the price was all the way down here, close to my take profit. And yes, the trade was close to my target, but it still wasn't proper to move my stop loss by 0.5 point. If that, I should have moved it to my break even or left it where it was instead of moving it 0.5 point, because that doesn't really make sense. So yeah, that's something I definitely want to improve on going forward, is to either leave my stop loss where it is, or on a trade like this, because it is such a quick scalp type of trade, move it to my break even once I see I'm up about 75% in the trade. All in all, this was a good trade. I would definitely take this one again, but next time with better trade management. And now coming over to my next trade, this was the winning trade. Looking at a bit of context, we can see that half an hour into the market's open, the price dropped down into my 30-minute demand zone and bought up very aggressively, breaking the intraday highs and the overnight highs. And on the 15-minute time frame, we can see that the price created a very nice demand zone right at 69.79, drawn by my green line here. And now dropping down to the 1 minute time frame, what I wanted to see was a pullback into my demand zone to look for reasons on the order flow to then go long. And after we dropped into this demand zone, we can see the price going sideways on this candlestick chart. But on my footprint chart, where I can see the buying and the selling, what I saw was a bunch of selling coming in, but the price wasn't moving lower. We can see it by this big red bubble, all these red delta bars, negative delta bars. More red here, tried to break it again, look at all that red selling there. And so in this whole consolidation area, there was aggressive selling trying to push price lower, but that whole time, it was failing to do that. Therefore, I view this as the sellers getting absorbed by passive buying. And then right here, when the sellers got super aggressive and the price did not move lower at all, and then buying started putting pressure on all of that selling, I entered long at the 69.83s, risking about 4 points to make 12 and then a couple runners. And here on my NinjaTrader platform, it shows where I entered and where I exited. The reason I exited at 69.95 was because there was a small 5-minute supply zone, but I had 2 runners taken up to these highs and both of these take profits hit. The thing I would probably do differently with this trade was enter a bit sooner. Right here, when the price tried to break below these lows, there was a bunch of selling that bleeped in and then immediately got bought up. That was a great entry confirmation in which I missed, which caused me to end up entering about 3 points later. That's 3 points of profit that I missed out on because I hesitated. Overall, however, I am happy with this trade. It worked out very well, and I was able to see that absorption at this demand zone of those sellers. It is definitely a trade I would take again, but hopefully get a better entry on the next one and not hesitate. Something I think I'm getting a lot better at as well is managing my risk. That loss was a $250 loss, and this profit was $1,000, which puts me up about $750 over the last 2 days, despite having a 50% win rate. Overall, I'm very happy with how I traded this week, noting some small improvements that I can implement into next week's trading, and things I did well that I can double down on. If you have any questions about the video or my trades, feel free to ask them in the comments below. But apart from that, I will see you guys in the next one.